Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is the 221st Governance Risk Call here at MakerDAO. My name is Peyton. I go by Pros11 online, and I am one of your governance facilitators. Really excited to be hosting today's call. This is our kind of weekly get-together where we talk about all things related to protocol governance and risk. This is kind of our community call, for lack of a better term. So I really appreciate everyone that's here with us live. You might also be watching on a recording, so welcome if that describes you as well. Before we get into things, just a few ground rules to go over. As I mentioned, this is being recording, so let's try to not talk over one another. Not fun in person, definitely not fun for a recording. So it'll make a much better atmosphere if we can add that respect. A few different ways we can go about facilitating that. Number one, if you can and you're comfortable, turn those cameras on. It's always easier to deal with visual cues and get to see some of the wonderful people that are a part of our community. We also have the nice features from Zoom, like the chat as well as reactions. Those are great for expressing yourself during the call, as well as dropping comments and questions. Like, this is an open call. We really do encourage you participating and getting your viewpoint heard. So particularly if you'd like to hop on the mic, one helpful thing you can do is find that raise hand button under reactions and the desktop version of Zoom anyway. And that just kind of signals to me as a host that you'd like to be called on once the current speaker finishes up their thoughts. So yeah, with all that in mind, basically just drop something in chat, raise a hand, do something to let me know you've got something to say, and I'm more than happy to give the platform over to you. And with that in mind, the only other thing is to try to remember to introduce yourself first time you talk. Not everyone on the call may be familiar with you. Also, is nice for the recording and anyone else who's taking notes. Yeah, I think that's it. Just be nice and we'll get along great. So we do have a bit of an agenda to get through. As usual, we'll be talking about the votes and what's going on in the land of maker improvement proposals. We'll be hearing a little bit about growth and how they did it in 2022. And then today we'll be discussing sub-DAOs and ecosystem actors as kind of the continuation on our in-game series. So hopefully it should be a fun, engaging governance call for you guys. We really do appreciate your participation, and it's a better call for it. So we'll hop into things. You'll ask some questions and we'll have a great time. All right. I'll also kick us off with going over the votes. Was a pretty busy Monday over at GovAlpha. We had 18 polls posted to the voting portal. We had 3 of those conclude, and you'll be hearing about the other 15 during the MIP segment. So of the weekly polls that concluded before today's call, we saw the poll for a one-time MKR distribution for CES pass. We also saw the Open Market Committee proposal. That's the Parameter Proposals Group with their kind of monthly recommendations passing. The only thing that did not pass, or rather in this case, the option with the most vote, was do not burn MKR. And that was for that trial deployment of DSS Kill. So no further action will be taken there. On the other 2, you can expect those in upcoming executives. Speaking of the executive front, this week's executives has already passed. It's pending execution, took care of some budget streams, MKR vesting, and delegate compensation. We are not planning executive for next Wednesday, but we'll have one the week following that. For those of you that are wondering, we are going to be trying to be more of a biweekly cadence for executives this year. Granted, circumstances may or may not allow that to happen, and we're still working on exactly if we should codify that plan or not. But generally speaking, when Patrick and I are coordinating with P and some of the other groups, that is what we're going to be targeting, is every other week for executives, just so you know, going forward in 2023. All right, that's more than enough blabbing on my end, so I'm going to hand over the mic to one of our MIP editors. I believe we have Pablo with us to give us the MIPS rundown.
Indeed, thank you, Peyton, and hello everyone. Pablo here from rainy Córdoba. So we had indeed 15 ratification polls going up on chain on Monday. So let's take a quick compressed look at the voting landscape right now. So we had a MIP 92 to onboard USDC from the PSM to EARN, which has no as its barely leading option. We have 6 amendments and removals. We have a proposal to remove the cumulative 250,000 DAI limits from the protocol DAI transfer MIP, which has yes as its leading option. The ratification call for the sub-proposal to tighten up recognized delegated participation metrics offers options to approve the introduction of the abstain modifier, the introduction of higher participation requirements and weighting for executives, and the option to approve both changes, which is the leading option at the moment. And I'll try to make it a bit quicker. The sub-proposal to amend the Maker Keeper Network MIP, which has yes as its leading option. Cool. Further, we have a sub-proposal to repeal MIP 14 entirely, with yes as the currently leading option. A sub-proposal to remove 2 MIPs related to the superseded domain framework, also passing, and the amendment to remove the December calendar exception, which is being rejected at the moment. As for coordinated framework sub-proposals, next slide, please. We have the self-onboarding of outcomes, which offers multiple options for their retroactive compensation. The 80% multiplier is the leading option right now. We have a number of funding requests. Next slide, please. We have 3 special purpose funds, one to support the expanded strategic finance mandate, one to develop proof of performance for the Ethereum cluster, and one for a defense fund, none of which are passing at the moment. We have 2 MIP 14 requests, one to fund tech ops for the month of February and one to fund Immunify security from December 2022 to March 2023. Finally, we have a proposal to onboard a Chainlink as a keeper network and a declaration of intent to develop an on-chain monitoring solution for real-world asset folds, both of which are passing. Now let's take a non-exhaustive look at the proposals in RFC. We have no less than 8 top-level MIPs to onboard real-world asset folds, to introduce new contracts against governance attacks, to utilize the HATS protocol in MakerDAO, to refund people who's lost their DAI by sending it to the contract, and 3 recently proposed MIPs that define frameworks to request funds and organize work around high-level objectives in the DAO. Next slide. We have an amendment proposal that modifies MIP 41, that is the facilitator MIP, to expedite some of its processes and increase its flexibility, and an amendment to MIP 62, which is the collateral offboarding process that allows changing the communication responsibilities. As for core unit framework proposals, in the next slide, we have the core unit offboarding for engineering services, a budget request by TechOps, and the facilitator onboarding proposal for Nico to lead collateral engineering services. Finally, I really had to rage with it. We have proposals to restart the MKR burning and a MIP 14 request to fund the development of an informational endgame portal. And that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Right on, Pablo. We really appreciate it. Sorry about your mouse, and I can imagine even just clicking and typing out all those MIPs put quite a bit of strain on it. Definitely going to be a busy couple of months here in the governance cycle. So thank you for putting that together and appreciate the update. Cool. I think we're going to carry right into our initiative updates. As a reminder, if you would like to see more form of the glance type style content, whether that's written, live, posted on YouTube, that sort of thing, let us know. Drops a comment in Discord or the forums. Helps us decide what content we should continue and carry on with versus what we change. But for now, we're just gonna keep on keeping on. and get into our initiative updates here. All right. Oops. If I could single click. So we were going to hear from Growth, and I wasn't sure, Nadia, was it going to be you that was presenting today?
Yes, it's me. Just give me a second.
I can give you a screen share access here.
Yes, please.
Stop sharing. And we can do the Zoom screen share dance. While Nadia's getting those slides together, really appreciate people coming on for initiative updates. Pretty easy. If you do have anything you want to update on, just reach out to myself, Patrick. We're more than happy to get you on the docket. I know next week we're going to be hearing from the Viridian cluster, and there's a few other groups that are trying to schedule some slots as well. So if you have something you'd like to present on the GNR, feel free to reach out and we'll help make that happen.
I think I'm having troubles to share my screen, so probably it's better if I share with you.
Happy to do that as well. Shoot it over and I'll share on mine.
Yeah, okay. Give me a second. I sent you the link.
Thank you. Pulling that up now. Okay, give me one moment and I will reshare and we'll get the show back on the road. Appreciate everyone's patience. Okay, sharing window. Presenting slides. Almost like magic. Take it away, Nadia.
Thank you, Peyton. Okay, hello everyone. So in here I will like to share with you a summary of the post that's in the forum where we talked about everything we did last year, and not just like growth as it began, that it was with one particular mandate around ecosystem and increasing partners that help us to increase the supply and demand, but also we did a lot of things last year, and one of those things was to started a new group called Brand to also like help Maker with the brand part. Next slide, please. So after thinking with the team about everything we did, I think one of the most important things that we can recall is collaboration. This was the second year as a core unit and second year as a DAO without the foundation. And of course, like there are a lot of things to improve, and that's why the end game it's here. But I also wanted to showcase how we collaborated with other core units, and thanks to that, we were able to execute different initiatives. So again, everything is more in detail in the post in the forum, but I want to like just give you a summary of what we did. So with a strategic finance and CES, thanks to the onboarding of real world assets, we were able to create stories about it. We were able to position Maker as the bridge between DeFi and CeFi and appear in more traditional venues like Times Magazine, Bloomberg. And that was super important for us because Maker started to be recognized in the traditional finance ecosystem, which was like a major win for us. It opened a lot of new opportunities to Maker. Also, with the strategic finance, we work on the initiative we call the PSM revenue share by talking with different entities on how we were able to getting part of the yield that they were generating with USDC, USDP, and GUSD. Well, you have seen different proposals in the forum about it. Also, with risk, we onboarded new crypto collaterals, another derivative of StakeIt, and also GNO. In the back, of course, Oracle's coordinate, because every onboarding, we have to work with them. Also with protocol engineering, we work on how to create integrations to the products that they had launched. So the Maker Teleport and DSR, we have been collaborating with them on these two new products on different aspects, like the branding for Teleport. If you guys remember, it was once called Wormhole, Maker Wormhole, now Maker Teleport. And we work on all the branding, the visuals, and right now we are supporting a grant so more front ends can integrate Maker Teleport, and we can have like the teleport functionality just in one place. For DSR, we also have been working with our ecosystem to create a better version of the DSR through a token. We also work with data insights on creating campaigns, like thanks to data insights, because every week we have an analysis of what's happening with Maker. And we also, like thanks to the data that they provide, we created a campaign called Maker Nature, where people that opened Maker Vault was also the owner of a new tree in the world. The summary of the campaign is also in the post that we posted last on December. And also if you don't remember, things like after we asked for the Twitter account and LinkedIn account, the Maker Twitter and LinkedIn came to life. And we have been collaborating not just with GovAlpha, but with the extended DAO on all the announcements and all the content that we keep posting on Twitter, and keep informed our community and people that are external to Maker. And well, we also did a lot of other things with other coordinates and the DAO in general, events, swag, Maker dinners during the year. So it was like a very interesting year, because thanks to this collaboration, we were able to launch all of these new initiatives for Maker. Next slide, please. Regarding to partners, because as I said, one of the main objectives of growth is partners collaboration. We started to do different types of collabs, and it was around DAO to DAO collaborations. This was like the first year that we started doing things like this, I suppose, because last year was an interesting year for DAOs, and we saw new DAOs evolving and new communities and new governance models coming to life. So the difference between what we have been doing in a one-to-one way, as I called it, and the DAO way is that with the DAO way, well, it's a community decision, there's high transparency, and everyone can participate on the negotiation. It's not just growth, like anyone in the community can help us on it. An example of this is what we did with Optimism, with Hub and Gnosis. And well, the more traditional way, the one-to-one way is just like the difference is not the community that decides what to do. It's more like a team decision. Transparency, it's medium. Sometimes there's no transparency because sometimes we have to sign NDAs to move forward the deals. Examples of this is what we did with Binance, with Argent. Last year we did marketing campaigns with them to accelerate DAI adoption in these platforms. Like we chose one of the biggest DeFi platforms as Argent and one of the biggest CeFi platforms as Binance. And also something that really interesting that we did last year was the integration of DAI in GMO and Coinvest to Japanese exchanges, because that was a very long pending that we had since the time of the foundation, because in Japan there's like a challenging thing about listing stablecoins in exchanges. So we had to like work with these exchanges to present a case and have DAI approved to be listed in Japanese exchanges. This is just these are just examples. You might see other integrations and marketing campaigns that we did during the year in the summary of the year, but also like every month I post a summary of the month where I'm always explaining the integrations that we did and the campaigns that we're running. Next slide, please. So regarding Twitter and LinkedIn, I think I don't have to explain it with metrics because we all see it every day. It is quite remarkable, the impressions per month and also the engagement. I didn't include it here because more details, again, are in the forum. But it is interesting how it grew once we started managing the Twitter account. That was in February. And also LinkedIn, it was in September. So you can see like a difference. We also created a process to engage other parts of the DAO on the content that we post on Twitter and LinkedIn. If you don't know about it, it is also in the forum, and we have a Discord chat where you can like tell us what you want to see on Twitter, and we can post that announcement for you. Next slide, please. And this is one of the things that I'm more excited about. We started working on the MakerDAO website last year. I expect to have something to show to the community in the next 2 weeks. But what we are doing is revamping of the website. Like on your left, you can see the old website, very DAI focused, where the maker is DAI and just DAI and a stable, unbiased currency, and that is it. And we wanted like to show that Maker is more than that. So we are presenting Maker as a conjunction of various things. So we have products. We identified the different products of Maker, DAI being one of these products, but we also have Maker Vaults, the D3M, the PSM, Maker Teleport, real world assets, the DSR, and I hope with in the future more to come. Also, we wanted to like showcase the health of the system, because I think that is one of our biggest strengths, is that we are transparent and what is happening on the health of Maker and DAI. It is on chain, so we wanted to have it on the website. That is not currently in the website. We also want to have a space for the Maker ecosystem, and we also want to have a space for the DAO and what is a DAO and why Maker is also a DAO. And yes, these are mockups. The site is not ready yet. We are working on it. Once we have like some details closed, we will be presenting our work on the website to the community. Next slide, please. We also launched the transparency dashboard. This is an effort that we think it is important. We think that the forum is full of information, so it is important to have one place where delegates, community, and people external to Maker can understand what we do as a core unit. We are also working with SCS on their general dashboard, but for us, financial health is just one part of transparency. So in this dashboard, and the link is in the forum post, it is a Notion page where you can find finance dashboard, business development dashboard that includes like the deals that we have been closing per quarter, the tier of the deal, and the region. Also, you will find the Twitter dashboard with the metrics of engagement and other metrics that we follow. Marketing and PR with everything regarding to campaigns with partners, but also every time that a Maker appears in the news, we are like doing a follow-up on that. And we are also, every time that we have something to tell to ecosystem, to the community, we also work with a PR agency to being on the news and like present the story the way we want to present it. So I invite you all, if you haven't, to check the transparent dashboard, which like it's everything like that you might want to know about growth. It is there. Next slide, please. Yeah, so that's it. Any questions?
Yeah, thanks for presenting, Nadia. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kianga, for your comments.
I might fire one off, I guess, in terms of kind of forward-looking, right? Like in game, we shift pretty drastically from growth being the responsibility of a core unit to kind of like a collective management challenge under the scope framework. I'm curious if you have any kind of lessons from the past several years of doing this that you think are going to be particularly important as we look to reorganize and keep Maker growing.
Oh yes, absolutely. Actually, I really plan to give a lot of feedback to the growth scope. For me, it is quite interesting to see how the business development scene is changing, and now it is more open to these DAO to DAO deals, and that is why I wanted to showcase it in the summary of the year, because that wasn't an option in the past. So I think like this future that the end game is presenting, it is very promising regarding these DAO to DAO deals, that it is possible. We can just like go to a forum, present a proposal to our community, and create initiatives doing that. Of course, there will always be the part that you have to deal with centralized companies. Like there will always be Binance or the next Binance, I don't know, like around, and it is also important that a part of Maker is have presence there. So it is important for stablecoin to be listed in the main centralized exchanges. It is important for a stablecoin that wants to be a global currency, like to have presence in more localized exchanges in different countries. So yeah, like that is one of the parts that I'm really thinking on how to help Maker Core with the growth scope to deal with, because I think the DAO to DAO, it's something that we know how to do, and it will be natural for this decentralization path that we want to follow. But one thing that I'm thinking now is how we can continue working with the centralized counterparties, because I really think we need them, at least for now.
Someone I see one of our recognized delegates, Raphael, if you want to take it away.
Thanks, Peyton. Nadia, where's your priority regarding growth of DAI and Maker? Is it more retail, or are you like going more after these kind of DAO partnership and maybe institutional interests?
Well, it is not retail because we are not a business to consumer solution. That is why we need partners. I mean, if in our Twitter account we sold it to retail, they don't have a place to buy DAI, because we don't have like a DApp. We just have a website that doesn't have enough information, and we don't have a way for retail to access to our product. So we always have to rely on partners, and that is why I consider that to fulfill our mandate, we have to think about this as a business-to-business solution. And our partners are the ones who help us to talk with retail. And that is why we have we put a lot of effort on all of these marketing campaigns with our partners, where we support them with budget and the message and the structure on how we want to communicate what Maker and DAI is to retail. In terms of efforts, well, we have different verticals. We constantly are looking for ways to increase DAI liquidity and DAI presence, not just in mainnet, but also in other chains. So we started with L2s. So for us, it's very important to maintain DAI's presence in Optimism and Arbitrum, and in the future, Starknet. But also, we also are very proactive working with Polygon and Binance, because there's where retail is. So although there's no canonical DAI in these two chains, we keep supporting them because we think it is important to have these partnerships for just because retail is there. But we also have been doing a lot of things with institutions, like the PSM revenue share. Actually, it was because of what we did in the past that we included Paxos and Gemini inside the PSM. Maybe now is a bad idea according to some people, but at the time before the FTX saga, it looked like a promising solution for Maker. So we also do a lot of things with institutions. At some point, we started talking also with institutions about the idea of institutional vaults, but I think last year was terrible for the crypto ecosystem in general. So a lot of these initiatives, we have to stop them because of what happened. The markets are not the right markets for institutions wanting to leverage their positions. So yeah, but yeah, we our main audience are institutions and companies and DAOs and protocols, not retail.
I do want to make sure we have enough time for our discussion segment, but while we have Nadia here, any last questions for growth and kind of what they accomplished in 2022?
By the way, something that I didn't mention here, but it is in the Maker post, we are also collaborating with everything that's happening on the end game strategy, and we are helping on how to transmit the message to the masses and not just the maker community. We are thinking a simplified way to explain the end game to the press, because one thing that we are following with our PR agency is that every time that any media outlet talks about the end game, like the summary of that is people don't understand what it is. So our main objective for this year is to change that perception, and we want people, journalists, the media in general, to understand what it is about.
Well, that's about as perfect of a segue as I can imagine. So I'm going to take it, Nadia. Thanks for taking the time to present today. And yeah, let me switch back over to the other presentation here. And we'll get a bit more into our kind of in-game series, talking about the basic building blocks of in-game, what they are, how they function, and working through questions. To kind of add to Nadia's point there, I really do feel like the only way we can explain that to other people well, right, is to understand it well ourselves first. So a big part of that starts with us. We will discuss it with each other among peers, and we hope by dedicating a few moments to each call on that, we're able to not only help each other learn, but also help each other talk about in game, find ways that people seem to click with it and make it more approachable. So you'll have to let us know how we do with that today, and yeah, feedback welcome and encouraged. But as I said, today we are going to be continuing on in our series and talking about sub-DAOs and ecosystem actors. I'll try not to steal too much of Retro's thunder here, but these are really the workforce building blocks of in-game, right? The people that are actually doing the labor of the different systems and things we want to put in place. As a reminder, before we get too far, this is like part 2. We're talking about sub-DAOs and ecosystem actors. We will be taking a little bit of a break before we get into game theory, so we can go over some of the finer points. So like next week, you're going to be hearing about budgeting and a few other fun MIPS and RFC that relate to endgame. But yeah, this is kind of our general curriculum, which is let's go over the building blocks of in-game, talk about the game theory, and then talk about building it. So with about as long-winded introduction as I could possibly do, Retro, you feel good to start talking to us about sub-DAOs and ecosystem actors?
Yeah, definitely. Don't sell yourself short, though. I'm sure you could go on a little bit longer. But I'm Retro, the interim facilitator for CES, as well as the ecosystem scope contributor. If this is better, Raphael, let me know. But today, we're, like Peyton introduced, we're going to be talking about the decentralized workforce of the DAO. Last week, we talked about concepts and components that were closer to the core, which dictated the overall rules of how the workforce should operate and some of the goals that are being set for the larger central MakerDAO core. And today we'll start moving out to the fringes of the ecosystem by talking about the workforce. If we can move on to the next slide.
We will eventually move on to the next slide. Sorry about that, Retro.
Oh, good. Oh, good. While he's doing that again, the two central components would be the ecosystem actors and sub-DAOs. So starting with the sub-DAOs, the first thing to highlight is that these are communities and organizations that are DAOs in their own right, but they're powered by Maker and DAI. The overall concept of moving the workforce farther away from the core is that it can both increase the agility and swiftness of these teams to perform work, but due to the structure of the tokenomics that we'll cover in the next section of the game theory, this concept of, again, moving the workforce further away really serves as an insurance policy or concept for the core, due to the fact that the finances of the DAO are more closely related and better defined, but additionally, these are teams that um, or specifically sub DAOs that what's the word I'm looking for? It's more of like a retainer type relationship, where the workforce is readily available, the capacity to take on the work and make sure that it's supported through any turbulent situations don't impact the delivery of the scopes, and the again, ability for these teams to operate independently is better defined, allowing sub DAOs then to not only perform work for Maker Core, but also perform work for other entities, other decentralized projects, or potentially even centralized businesses that are at least mature enough to work with a DAO. This then, moving over to the graphic to start to detail some of the subcomponents of a sub DAO, would be starting at the top left. The sub DAO token is the driver of governance and a way to equate the valuation of the sub DAO. The sub DAO elixir is then the part that speaks to part of the insurance policy, as well as the incentive mechanism for the sub DAO to be readily available to deliver work for the core based on frameworks. The sub DAO community is both the same function as the MakerDAO community. You have your general participants that are supporting the DAO through forum posts, as well as going out into other communities and properly representing the sub DAO. But additionally, it's also the sub DAO token holders, the workforce, more encompassing of the people that make up the DAO. On the bottom right, sub DAOs will be driven through snapshot votes. This is a lighter weight mechanism compared to Maker Core's governance system, and can feed into impacting and operating with Maker Core through the omnibus concept. Again, we'll cover that in the next session in more detail. But the lower left-hand corner then component talks or represents the sub DAO finances, which are both again related to many different aspects. So you can start to see how the game theory foundation is laid by defining these components both separate and somewhat relationally. And then finally, you have the onboarded teams. Today they're called clusters. They are the workforce of the sub DAO then that's formally onboarded and again retained to deliver work. In the middle, this is all being driven by a class of another sub DAO. So moving back over to the left-hand bullet list at the bottom there, it says that there are 3 classes to sub DAOs: protector DAOs, creator DAOs, and facilitator DAOs. The structure represented on the right represents all sub DAOs, but the nuance for protector DAOs and creator DAOs is that since they're DAOs in their own right, they do need support running and maintaining the operations of the DAO. The original concept that is in Endgame V3 and it's been talked about in DVC calls is that the duty to or the role to perform those duties would be managed by the sub DAO teams or the onboarded teams, and defining those as different types, being admin as well as contributor teams. However, that's been simplified for the purpose of making sure that a sub DAO workforce is hyper focused on delivering the work and not caught up with more of the rules and regulations that dictate how sub DAOs should operate. And a better fit team for that duty then would be a facilitator DAO. Again, I think it's important to note here that facilitator DAOs were previously labeled as governor DAOs. This is an evolving concept that's only a couple weeks old, and more formal materials should be posted in the forum shortly to further elaborate. But for everybody's reference point, if you're reading older material that says governor DAO or admin team, the facilitator DAO then would assume those duties. So moving on to the next slide to talk about ecosystem actors a little bit. I'm sorry. Just to highlight that, forgot that this was in there to further elaborate on how the different classes create the opportunity for the game theory to operate. Protector DAOs are best reference point here are engaging with real world assets. Creator DAOs then engage with decentralized collateral, and facilitator DAOs again engage around the governance and DAO operations both for core and sub DAOs. The protector DAOs would have tighter restrictions and more layers to that insurance policy concept by being allowed to take on certain levels of risk as is associated to real world assets, but making sure that in those situations are balanced then with the sub DAO's finances to absorb losses or other penalties or situations that may occur as it's defined both in the framework and the endgame constitution. The thing to call out here too for protectors is that they have a clause where they're the only sub DAO that's able to work with arrangers directly to facilitate the work related to real world assets then. Creator DAOs, in contrast to protectors DAOs, then have fewer restrictions. And it may be more appropriate to expand on that class of work that they perform. The decentralized collateral isn't necessarily the only thing that they work on. They're also performing some elements of the growth scope potentially to going out into the ecosystem. And as Nadia just mentioned, they could both perform work against the growth framework for both business development and then potentially user-focused growth work as well. To allow them to deliver on those frameworks, the creator DAOs have fewer restrictions as compared to the protector DAOs, and again, the wider scope. An important thing to note then for facilitator DAOs is that there are two distinctions then to kind of absorb the initial definition of admin teams and contributor teams. The concept of an admin team then would be applied to an ecosystem facilitator DAO, and then the duties related to managing the DVCs, scopes, and frameworks, kind of forming a layer in between, another layer in between the decentralized workforce and the core would be the core facilitator DAOs that are mainly focused on driving those processes as well as their own internal DAO operations. And then the ecosystem facilitator DAOs would be hyper-focused on supporting the sub-DAO operations in ensuring that the scope frameworks that potentially impact interface and some other supporting functions are met. Facilitator DAOs could probably have their own section, and I think we'll do that as we start to move into, say, like the 200 level course, if you view these first three segments as a 100 level course. Raf, I do see your hand there.
Yeah, just a question, like what's the ratio of facilitator DAOs to sub DAOs? Will like every sub DAO have its own facilitator, or one facilitator manages some or all of them? Like what's the deal there? Yeah,
that's a great question. The again concept of a facilitator DAO is evolving, and the to call it a specific section in Endgame v3, if you look at the autonomous incubator for sub DAOs, it did provide some logic about the balance of the ratio between the three different classes of sub DAOs. To specifically answer your question, a single ecosystem facilitator DAO would be able to support multiple sub DAOs. the specific logic about how that should be balanced and implemented is still being experimented with or developed. And there needs to be some redundancy then, because again, the whole point of the end game plan is to make sure that there's resiliency around every aspect of the DAO, and the resiliency is only created if there's the opportunity to allow a sub DAO to replace their facilitator DAO if they're underperforming.
Yeah, I want to add that the facilitator, maybe the name is not the best, and we've been using the word facilitator a lot. So potentially sub-DAOs could have their own facilitators for that sub-DAO. So it's not that the facilitator sub-DAO provides the people to manage the sub-DAOs. It's more to facilitate the whole interaction between the multiple ecosystem actors, scopes, frameworks, other sub-DAOs, etc. So that's something that's worth clarifying, I believe.
Yeah, I was just going to cut in and say, like, I acknowledge that, like, periodic name changes, especially when they're related to like other concepts, can get really confusing. So, like, we feel you on the like studying and learning in game front, that can be hard. But it was kind of coming around to this most recent update, because now we're starting to get to the point where the different classes like are actually labeled towards their primary focus, right? Like, you have protector DAOs who exist to protect our reward asset collateral and agreements. You have creator DAOs who their job is to create new decentralized revenue streams. And you have facilitator DAOs whose job is to facilitate decentralized governance. And the key to kind of each of those being that, like, yes, they're involved. Yes, we're going to talk about the complexities of where they interact with other points in the system. But we're kind of honing in on that idea that, like, each entity has this individual purpose that helps fulfill a wider ecosystem role. So when we're talking about these classes, and yes, they have different names and it can be a little confusing, but just as like a word of advice for how you approach it and think about these, is just try to think about, like, okay, like who is a good fit for this? Like, what type of person or entity or business interest should be pursuing this type of thing? So for facilitators, you're thinking of like governance as a service. You're thinking about arbitration models like Lex, and there's a bunch of cool ones out there. So I know it can be difficult with the names, but do try to look past like what something is titled and think about its actual function within the system. I think that goes a long way to kind of entrenching the learning of what it does, rather than focusing on what we're calling it today. It's probably enough interruptions for you, Retro. Sorry, but thank you for handling those questions.
Definitely not interruptions. Appreciate the help trying to clarify and keep the vocabulary straight. I think I'm going for the record on the word DAO said on a GNR today, so let's keep it going. If you could go to the next slide, then. We just spent a lot of time talking about sub DAOs to ensure that resiliency and flexibility of the decentralized workforce. The concept of an ecosystem actor is also defined in Endgame. And a very simple way to think about this is when we talk about a sub-DAO, there's a team performing work that's internal to that sub-DAO, and then a large governance infrastructure system that manages how that sub-DAO works with the core and is directed on the work. The ecosystem actor concept can be related to the team delivering the work within the sub-DAO without all the infrastructure. To say that with less words, they're just an independent organization or a vendor that does work on behalf of a sub-DAO. They have total autonomy and are independent organizations. So these teams wouldn't have the same retainer type relationship to Maker Core, but they are still required to have the same level of experience or expertise required to deliver the work to the core. So ecosystem actors need to be knowledgeable about Maker, decentralized finance, Web3, but that's Maker isn't specifically their primary focus. Their underneath the endgame plan is only for delivering work, and their work is delivered through scoped, which probably isn't the best word, through well-defined engagements with sub-DAOs. This could be done through like an SLA, some sort of RFP process, and is really up to the sub-DAO to dictate how they want to engage with this external ecosystem actor. And I think it's important to highlight here as well that there's an evolution path then for ecosystem actors that want or to pursue that more retainer-based or hyper-focused relationship to the core by being onboarded by a sub-DAO. So then their ecosystem actor classification would move into that cluster or internal team of a sub-DAO delivering work. Again, still have the ability to deliver work externally. Maybe some of their autonomy would be limited depending on how a sub-DAO wants to define the rules of how a team is managed. And again, that's I think part of the fun organic nature of Endgame, where we could see more innovation and experimentation in the perimeter of the ecosystem, and then those can continue to trickle back in. So then if there is a best practice that's discovered for how the sub-DAO is running, the core could potentially update that as long as it doesn't break the endgame constitution and other concepts. I'm sorry, it would be implemented into the ecosystem framework then, as long as it's compliant with the constitution. If there's no questions related to ecosystem actors on the next slide, then we'll provide a little illustration about how frameworks are then the link for the external workforce to engage with the core. The three different sub-DAOs are colored on the left-hand side, and the scopes from last week are then somewhat color-coded related to who's primarily delivering against those frameworks. So I think the easiest example then would be protector DAOs. Their primary focus is onboarding real-world asset collaterals as defined by the framework. That's not to say that they don't need to appreciate, understand, and follow other frameworks. Again, going back to the slides from last week, showing the arrows about how tertiary and secondary scopes impact primary scope delivery, the real world asset collateral framework would need to be delivered against rules defined in both physical resiliency and stability and liquidity, but those secondary frameworks would impact both real world asset collateral and decentralized collateral. Creator DAOs, to try to refine that point then, would be the primary delivery of decentralized collateral framework opportunities and goals, as well as growth or that outreach primary scope. But then they, again, would have to also appreciate the other scopes that feed into it. Facilitator DAOs are, again, focus on the facilitation of DAO management and DAO operations. So they would play a more foundational role, primarily in the ecosystem and arbitration scope, but then also need to provide management or support for the sub-DAOs, acting as an ecosystem facilitator DAO for the interface and the infrastructure for those sub-DAOs. And then again, everything in white is, I think, applicable to everyone. And then focusing on the arrows then, in the middle, we have operational data, which is a two-way relationship between the workforce and the core. On the top, the sub-DAOs are primarily delivering performance operational data to the scopes, both accomplishing the goals that are defined, how the work is being delivered, and then extracting insights for improvement of the framework or the rules for the concepts we talked about last week to integrate that to make sustainable, continuous improvements to operational maturity. And then on the bottom, the rules or the rules of engagement or dictating how work must be delivered or what is being delivered are handed down to the sub-DAOs through those frameworks. And it's this recursive feedback loop once you start layering on more of the components of Endgame. But this concludes class for today. Happy to take any questions that the community may have, and really looking to drive home the points made in the first two presentations and the next one in the near future here.
Right on. I know one question we've got like at several points, and hopefully can give a much more clear answer now. It's like, what is this distinction between ecosystem actor and sub-DAO? Like, if you're a person who wants to come up with a company, like, how do you decide where you fit in?
Juan may clarify my answer a little bit here, but I would look at it from the point of view of I'm an independent business. Do I want to focus on the Maker project as my primary customer, going to the Pareto principle of like an 80-20 rule? Or do I want to be more flexible and take any opportunities that really come up that's best for my business? So to clarify the question again, like, what's the distinction between ecosystem actor or a sub-DAO, or what's the motivating factor behind of it? If a team is more passionate, focused, or in a better position to have their primary revenue stream and team and work capacity focused on the Maker protocol, that would be more appropriate of a sub-DAO team. If the ecosystem actor then wants to make sure that they're more inward looking, what's best for my business, if I want to be able to fire a client, not necessarily worry about that, I guess strategically in the long term as the organization operates, that would be a better fit for an ecosystem actor then.
Yeah, the way I see it, and I might be wrong, so this is my totally personal view, but the idea or the magic or superpower of a sub-DAO is all the tokenomics that are embedded with it. So I think these start to make sense when you look at a sub-DAO to have the possibility to use the line of credit from Maker. So for example, the easiest example is a protector sub-DAO, where they can mint DAI if they collateralize it, and then with that in mind, they can use this this line of credit to capture some of the interest or whatever happens in the value chain. An ecosystem actor would not have access to this line of credit. So if that's not the intention of the group in whatever they are building, an ecosystem actor might make a lot more sense, because it might be much easier for that.
Mr. 3F Good Meta. I think you're muted there, boss.
You're on mute, Frank. Yeah.
My bad. Sorry for that. Going back to the first slide where you have sub-DAOs, you talk about Elixir. Is that something that I would imagine you're gonna talk about it later on in another GNR call when it comes to, the sub-DAO Elixir. Is that something that's still on the table where every sub-DAO competes to have entities or individuals farm the Elixir token, and how that benefits the sub-DAOs? That's still something in the works, or that has been taken out?
Yeah, go ahead, Juan, if you want to take it.
Yeah, no, I was going to say I think that for metanomics, Frank, even just covering the surface, it's probably a full GNR or a separate meeting that we should do, because it's relatively complex. There are a lot of things that are still being worked on. So yeah, a lot of tinkering, a lot of changing the parameters. So the short answer is that there's no good answer yet. But yeah, with that in mind, I don't know if it's a competition. It's more if the sub-DAO generates value. Let's say they create like a really good lending business, and they're capturing a lot of value, then the tokens should appreciate, and that should also benefit Maker as well. That's the idea, the one-liner. Then how that's achieved, I think it's going to take some time to get the first version going on, and then we might have to improve a lot if we see that there's some tokenomics. Yeah, I don't know if mistake is the right word, but if you see that the tokenomics are not doing the function that they were intended to do, we might have to tinker with that as well. So yeah, I don't have a good short answer. Sorry about that.
No worries. And just going back to ecosystem actors, would there be a rule in the Constitution that doesn't allow an ecosystem actor that's not part of the ecosystem to participate? Because I'm thinking if there's some kind of RFP, right, where a sub-DAO needs a special kind of service and is calling for ecosystem actors to provide that, and out of nowhere somebody comes in from another sector and bids on providing that service to the sub-DAO. Would there be something in the Constitution that doesn't allow that, or that's just not defined yet? So I guess what I'm saying is, will somebody from some other region just come out of nowhere and they'll be able to become an ecosystem actor if they run into an RFP that's necessary to be fulfilled for a sub-DAO to function properly?
I think we want to create the rules almost permissionlessly by ethos, and what I mean is that ideally when you create an RFP, you want to get the best service or the best product for the cheapest possible price, I guess. So you maximize the value. So with that in mind, I don't think we will try to put restrictions on, oh, this guy is from the inside. That said, there are a lot of things to consider, like, okay, I don't know, for example, Primoz, we really trust him because he's been working with Maker for a while and he knows the whole ecosystem inside out. So even if he's more expensive than, I don't know, if the difference is not that big with someone that's marginally cheaper, whoever's answering to that RFP might still want to choose the more expensive one just based on that trust. Ideally and hopefully we manage to put that explicitly, meaning that trust factor will have I don't know, a weight or something. We still need to define the framework for answering to the RFPs and handling it and doing the tenders. But once that's achieved, hopefully it's transparent and open for everyone, so that we can get the very best providing value for Maker.
Yeah, I think there needs to be a little flexibility here, because depending on the task, selecting for price might be ideal or actually not at all. So from the I submitted a couple of tenders to various contracts, and I think sometimes it's really just about the price, and that makes perfect sense because all the offerings are really comparable on this one thing. For instance, like if you buy, I don't know, 10,000 screws, and you have like a bill of materials and something that people have to fulfill, then it's just like one screw is like 0.1 cents cheaper, then cool, you take that. But when it gets more complex, then exactly these kind of soft skills or knowledge of the protocol play a much larger role. So I think it would be good to have some flexibility there.
Yeah, definitely. And to borrow from an example observed in the DAO today, if we look at front-end development, DSpot is a service provider that several core units utilize for developing the web platforms to use today. The opportunity to bring in a new front-end developer isn't really restricted then. and the it's just does the team that's onboarding a new ecosystem actor trust that they are knowledgeable about what they're working on?
And I was just going to add in, Frank, I think a lot of times, at least what's helped me with, I don't know, maybe it's just my feeling of understanding. I'd like to think it's my actual understanding of the end game as well, but also just in terms of how confident I feel about understanding, is I like to zoom out, right? So like in the ecosystem actor example, when we think about Maker Core, it's like Maker Core doesn't really care actually who does the work, right? They care that the work is done to a standard. So even though we don't have exactly how it's going to be determined now, the idea behind it will be making sure that work that gets submitted is up to a certain quality, rather than focusing necessarily on the identity of who it comes from. And kind of like likewise on your previous question, like we may not have the details on the facilitator DAO on the interactions there, but again, just thinking of like zooming out on what the interactions are supposed to be, like what function, you know, is X group supposed to have. I think kind of helps answer a lot of the questions because we may not know exactly what the rules will be or what the incentive is, but we know, you know, we need to keep bringing in more collateral. We know we're going to need to be doing X, Y, and Z. So we can kind of extrapolate that and assume, okay, so from a protocol perspective, at least in terms of our system design, we need to keep X being easy and X being hard. Yeah, that's at least just how I approach it, is trying to zoom out when I don't understand something and think, all right, from a system design point of view, like what function does this unit need to play? And then, okay, I may not have the exact answer. I may not understand exactly the nitty gritty of how that gets done, but I can at least get a function of why that gear is put into the system.
I'm not sure how we're doing on time, Peyton. Happy to keep going on this, or if we need to pivot, by all means. I think it's a
Yeah.
really good discussion, though, and based on the questions and the feedback, hopefully some more clarity of the components are achieved.
Yeah, we don't have a ton of time left, so that's a good shout there. Happy to continue this discussion. Also happy to hear like just feedback or questions or general areas you feel like we should take the time to explore, right? Like we obviously are going to need to be going into deeper detail on things and plan to do so. But it's also just important to kind of get everyone on the same page. So are there larger areas of in-game or kind of bigger addressable areas that we should be working into our curriculum? How are people feeling so far? Like, is this a useful attempt to use our community call? Right? Is this something we want to keep doing going forward? It'd be helpful if you have thoughts.
Yeah, sorry for not raising my hand, but one more question there, Retro and Juan. The sub-DAO financing. Can you kind of walk us through that on the sub-DAO slide? Because I think it's important, right? So does that automatically qualify a cluster to get sub-DAO financing? That's in other words, there's a proposal for a cluster, right? ABC cluster, and you show in that diagram that there's finances for sub-DAOs. So is there a rule of thumb on whether a cluster should get financing? So I'm kind of trying to get clarification there, right there. Yeah, sub-DAO finances. Is that when a cluster becomes a sub-DAO, or is prior to the cluster being approved by MKR token owners as a sub-DAO?
Right. So yeah, something to consider, and this is changing again. So take it with a grain of salt, especially if you're watching this later. But one of the things that we are or that we were talking about is that the sub-DAO would spin up kind of without any commitment to a cluster, and then it will be responsibility of the sub-DAO to onboard the cluster. I can't remember where this is from, but I remember adding like a financial incentive to do this. So if you manage to successfully onboard the cluster, we can unlock these tokens for the users or the token holders of that sub-DAO. If I don't know, if it becomes profitable, there could be this other unlock, and you can get as creative as you want. But it's not like anyone can say, hey, I'm a cluster, and then take it from there. It's more like, okay, who's the sub-DAO is spun up, and then that's sub-DAO has the, I don't know if responsibility is the right word, but they have the incentive to find the cluster to produce the work that they want to get done. So yeah, the meme was that the sub-DAO was kind of in charge of the community and the charity and doing the what it's like the fun stuff within the crypto sphere. It's like, hey, look at our logo, look at our, I don't know, pets, look at our whatever, and then the cluster is doing the actual work that produces the I don't want to say value, because there is also value in the community side, but it's the, let's say, the hard work versus the memes and the community. So that's a bit the idea.
Yeah, just to clarify what sub-DAO finances meant in this overall graphic is that sub-DAOs will have their own finances separate from the protocol. So in their own right, again, surplus buffer, definitions about how to fund teams, things like that. The specific financing that you were asking about and that Juan articulated wasn't specifically meant for this because it's more of like a component, and I would say that is more of like an implementation or rollout, kind of concept that will still working to nail down and then we'll educate as it matures.
And I do think, like, we were talking just an hour before this at the delegate office hours about some of the like comp challenges, right? Like, I do think the more you look at in game, the more like addressable areas there are. Like, there's a ton of stuff where we know, okay, well, we need a system that can't be this and it also can't be this. Has to be somewhere in the middle, but someone still needs to design it. The more you look, the more places there are to kind of fill that stuff in. So this is the type of work that eventually, as a community, we need to be transitioning into doing. So it's kind of our hope that by having calls like this, we can service some of those areas, inspire people to find ones they're interested in, and then follow up and keep that spark going. So yeah, thank you for the questions, Frank. They're really great. And personally, I feel like that's another in-game hurdle, is like it's really hard to ask questions about in-game because you feel like, oh, if I just understood this more, like I'm sure I'm asking a super obvious question. Half the time you're not. So, and the other half, it's an obvious question that half the room is also thinking. So if you do have questions, guys, like, yeah, we'll do what we can to make sure this is a really inviting and acceptable space for voicing them. Speaking of Rajiv, I see your hand. Take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Clayton. And maybe this is a follow-up to, I guess, where Frank was going. But I guess the question is, how do we transition to this new state, and how do we fund that? And maybe it's something we discuss in more detail next week when as the Viridian cluster, we want to present our plans to the community. Because in order to go to a sub-DAO, you need to have a working cluster. So, what's the plan to ensure there's funding in place for these clusters to become operational?
Yeah, and I mean, Rajiv, you probably are one of the best positioned person within Maker to answer that question, because I think that you might have not been on the SPF, but I think that there was also, I think there was an SPF for the cluster, and then there was another one coming for the, I forgot the details, but basically there are different ways to transition. One of them is someone working for the core unit decides to kind of like move on to something, and that's a bit of a, it's a bit allowed to work on something other than the mandates if it involves with the end game. Of course, if the delegates or the MKR holders do not agree with the long term, they might cancel that funding eventually. But it is expected, since the end game was approved, to get people starting working on stuff like that. If that capital is not enough, you might try to get an SPF. Again, I'm pretty sure it was you and your team that did this, so that's why I was mentioning that you're probably one of the best positioned to do this and to comment on the process.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hope we can have a productive discussion next week then. I know we're on the agenda, Peyton. I'm just conscious, like, when a cluster needs to bring in and onboard new talent that is not presently covered by a core unit budget, that's where I guess the challenge lies, and we sort of need to decide how we cater to that.
As usual, when I start typing something long, it's like by the time I can send it, I could just say it on the mic. But yeah, one of the things I love about governance, at least when I'm on the building end, it's a little more annoying when you're on the advising end. But the answer is always either use an existing system or create a new one, right? I think several people have pointed out that our existing funding systems are a little lackluster, so we'll either need to edit those or adopt a new one that'll help us with this transition. And yeah, it's really up to MKR voters, members of the community, like everyone kind of engaging and forming consensus about that. So really appreciate you volunteering to come on and talk about the cluster next week. And I think we should be in for a really good discussion about funding and kind of how the community thinks we should be approaching this. Paper, that's a lovely question that I think I'm going to table to next week when we have him on in the interest of time and starting off with a good question next week.
I mean, the short answer then for the recording, the question is why would Maker pay? Okay, more typing. So why would Maker pay the startup cost for what is effectively a borrower? The short answer is why would anyone or any DAO or any entity pay for anything? But I mean, as Nadia was mentioning, Maker is to B2B mainly, or B2B2C if you want. So potentially there are these networks that need to be built in order to have the volume and to make sure that DAI is accepted everywhere. If that is one of the major stable coins, then it's much better, and you have like a stronger flywheel moving forward and helping with the cost. That said, yeah, it's up to the MKR holders to decide how they manage the treasury. So it is a good question. I don't think we should be just giving money to anyone, quote unquote. So it's more like, okay, how do we make sure that we build this network in an effective way, and where should we allocate the capital and how? So I think it's a great point.
Yeah, and the thing that I like to bring up too, touching on what Kiango was talking about in terms of like strengthening the current bench, is that it's important to keep in mind that this is a reorg. This isn't. There's a lot of talk about creating all these new things and this new structure and new DAOs, but at the end of the day, it's still going from a fairly good sized operating organization that's going from point A to point B, of like an internal, reorganization, while also delivering external work. So there's just different nuances that are required for that isn't necessarily framed 100% accurately if we're paying the startup cost for borrowers. It's really about that evolution of today's current workforce, restructuring them into a new system, and then allowing that to grow.
Yeah, and I think one like interesting part is like there's plenty to debate and discuss about just in terms of the group itself and posing Monday, but there's also just the question of like, okay, is this the best way? Is this how we want to set the precedent for future requests to go? So there's a lot of cool governance ideas there that we can work out, and I think kind of the overarching guideline, at least I'm going with for in game, is like the transition is going to be a little muddy, right? Like all of our bylaws, all of our things are designed for an old system that we're attempting to no longer use. So as we transition away from it, we're going to have some pain points, and there's going to be some potential conflict. But I think discussing like why we think our positions are are correct, right? Bringing that forward, seeking kind of better thought, better procedure, better tools. We're going to end up with a better system, and it's just we need to kind of take that first step of trust and engaging with each other and knowing that like it may not all work out immediately, but we do have some timeline to work with. So yeah, just want to say huge thanks for those of you that come in week in and week out to talk about these things and participate, because yeah, there's no way around it. We're going to need to put in a lot of hours to making this full transition work. All right. Well, we're only a couple minutes over our usual ending time here, but I do think we should try to be respectful of people's time and start winding down. Huge thanks to Retro and SES and everyone who worked on these slides and took some time to present today. Really big thanks to everyone who took the time to ask questions, to engage. It really makes it a lot more meaningful of a meeting when we feel like it's with the full community and not just a couple of people. So thank you. We'll be back same time, same place next week. As I said, we're skipping the in-game theory for now, so we can go into a little more detail on some of the proposed funding mechanisms and tokenomics. Yeah, should be fun. As always, let's keep the discussion going on the forum and in Discord. And yeah, thanks, folks. Hope you have a great rest of your Thursday. Bye now.